Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode, we're doing a new concept. This is a concept that I've been kicking around in my head actually for a couple of years now, and I didn't quite know how I wanted to present it. The emphasis on this, and as you can see by the thumbnail, this is my third tribute to Sabu video that I've made in the last couple weeks since his passing. As you can see, he had a profound effect on me as a wrestling fan, but he was one of the guys that whenever I thought of this concept, he was one of the first guys that would come to mind. And as you know by the title, the concept's called Revolutionaries. And basically what this is wrestlers that have changed the game of professional wrestling and made a profound impact that if you took them out of the sport and you took them out of the history of the sport would be totally different without their impact. And I know a lot of this I said on the last two videos I made of Sabu, which you can check them out as well. I also made another video last year talking about the greatness of Sabu. Again, profound impact on me. Profound impact on a lot of his fans. What I'm going to talk about here is how Sabu changed pro wrestling and impacted the product that we see now and the product that we've seen for the last 30 years. Now, the first thing I want to mention is tables. Now, did wrestlers use tables before Sabu? Absolutely. Were they as widely used as they are now, where you get one almost every match or at least one or two a night getting broken? Not at all. It was special occasion. The guy that really brought this into the forefront, using tables in every one of his matches in unique and different ways, is Sabu. Now, you could say that impact changed wrestling in a way you didn't like. However, I think part of the reason for that is Paul Heyman. And I love Paul Heyman, don't get me wrong, don't think this is Paul Heyman bashing. But if you go back and you watch ECW, and you watch to the point where he fires Sabu because Sabu took a New Japan booking over an ECW booking, if you notice, right after that, everybody's doing tables in ECW, where it was Sabu and maybe a couple others would do them in special matches. After that, you had the Dudleys, you had the Gangstas, Public Enemy. I mean, putting a wrestler through the table after that point became what it is today, a normal occurrence. For me, though, Sabu was the innovator. Now, another thing while we're sticking with tables, another innovation, how he used the chair. Now, again, chairs go back with wrestling since probably when wrestling took a more theatrical role. What I want to bring up is his way he would use chairs. Not only would he hit you with them, he would throw them at you. And he would also use a chair as a diving board or a step up, where he would do stuff like he would jump on a chair, then jump on the top rope and hit you with a moonsault, or fly to the outside, or just use a chair to jump over the ropes and hit a plancha. He was so innovative with the way he used the chair that I don't think a lot of people have even caught up to that. You can see elements of that in some wrestlers' game, and you can see the direct influence, the way that they do the moves is exactly what Sabu did. So for me, that's another way he innovated. Now, while we're on it, let's talk about barbed wire. Again, barbed wire is something that was used before Sabu, but it's something that you remember him, whether it be in FMW, ECW, even his last match with Joey Janela. It kind of became synonymous with Sabu. Like a casket match is synonymous with The Undertaker, or TLC matches are synonymous with the Hardys, Edge and Christian, and the Dudley. Or an Ultimate X match became synonymous with guys like Frankie Kazarian. This was, quote-unquote, his specialty match. And boy, did he make spectacles anytime he stepped in between the ropes and the ropes were covered in barbed wire or replaced with barbed wire. He gave us something special every time. Now, from that, we're going to talk about his effect on ECW, Eastern Championship Wrestling. When Sabu was brought into the company, it had a bit of a buzz, and it had some great talent there. Guys like Shane Douglas were there already, the Sandman, some early stars like Tommy Cairo, Tommy Dreamer, guys that would go on to be synonymous with the company. When Sabu came in, though, he kind of changed what ECW was. It was a little bit hardcore before him. However, he ramped that up to 1,000. Sabu being put into ECW would be the equivalent of taking a Tesla right now and putting it back when Model Ts were on the road. That's the quantum leap in style of wrestling that ECW took under Sabu's influence. The high flying, the extremely violent matches, the reckless abandon that became synonymous with ECW. And here's the thing, I've seen a lot of interviews since Sabu died, and even me, a guy that I would consider myself a hardcore ECW fan, I always thought the ECW style was more taxing, which it was to a point. But seeing guys like Van Dam, the Dudley Boys, Sandman, Alfonso come out and talk about how they just made it look more violent. Yet again, chair shots to the head are always going to be violent. There's no changing that. Real barbed wire is always going to cut you. But his style, it was so reckless and so dangerous. I've said this 1,000 times before, and you may have even heard me say it in one of the many videos I've talked about Sabu. Sabu was like an experimental jazz musician or a punk rock musician, where the rules didn't matter. Song structure didn't matter to this jazz musician that wanted to play a 35-minute sax solo. Song structure didn't matter to bands like the Sex Pistols, who would put a guy up on stage with his bass unplugged because he didn't know how to play bass, but he looked the part. Sabu was punk rock. You talk about ECW being counterculture, being extreme, being different, being whatever you want to say. Whatever adjective you want to put for ECW, Sabu was that guy. He was the one at the forefront. He was the one leading the charge. If there's a Mount Rushmore for ECW, Sabu is George Washington. Sabu is the #1 alpha of the ECW style. He's a guy synonymous with it. He is the guy that pushed it forward, made it what it was. Now, because of that, he also affected the rest of the wrestling. The Attitude Era would be drastically different if Sabu didn't exist. Might we get the vulgarity still? Probably. Would we get crazy, insane spots that we had in the Attitude Era? Maybe not so much. Would we see Cactus Jack going off the cell? Possibly. But without guys like Sabu diving into the crowd or just doing crazy moves that no one's ever seen before, and some of his moves no one's been able to replicate. I think he had a profound effect on the Attitude Era, more so than a lot of people even understand. And let's just not just say the Attitude Era, the Monday Night War era, because you can extrapolate a lot of what Sabu did into the WCW Cruiserweight division and them pushing the limit. Sabu was that guy. He always found the limit of pro wrestling to be here, and he was here. Now, if we're going to talk about things that would be totally different without Sabu, let's talk about the wrestlers that would be different without him. Whether it be the Hardy Boys, which I can guarantee if you watched it in its time, you would see how much Sabu influenced the Hardy Boys. And I bet if you ask them, I guarantee they would mention that he was an influence. If you take that and you extrapolate that to other teams like the Motor City Machine Guns or the Young Bucks that may or may not realize that they're drawing influence from Sabu, but they're drawing the influence from the Hardys who drew it from Sabu. Wrestlers like Ricochet, Will Ospreay, AJ Styles, they can all thank Sabu for creating some of what they did and creating a style that they ran with. On the flip side, wrestlers that were into the hardcore style like a Nick Mondo or Nick Gage or even the Briscoe brothers to an extent, you could see where elements of what Sabu did went into their style. The Briscoe brothers, I've seen say that Sabu was a huge influence on them. With that, his reach and his reverberations are going to go on for a long time. Much like someone like, let's say, Gorgeous George. You may not realize how much Gorgeous George has affected pro wrestling today, 60, 70 years later, but it absolutely has, because he inspired people that inspired people that inspired people that are all doing a version of what Gorgeous George did originally. That's Sabu. He's inspired people that have inspired other people that have inspired other people, and we're far enough down the line that there are wrestlers that don't even know the moves that they are doing were originated by Sabu, but they learned it because their favorite wrestler did it, but he learned it from watching tapes of Sabu when he was a kid, or she. That's his impact on the wrestlers himself. Now let's talk about promotions. I already mentioned the Monday Night Wars and the Attitude Era would be drastically different without Sabu's influence on the game. What about other promotions? Would we have a CZW, for better or for worse? Would we get to that level of violence? Would it be cranked up that far? Would they have copied FMW if they hadn't seen it succeeding with ECW? Maybe, maybe not. Would we have Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, PWG, with their ultra high spot style and their car crash matches and some of the violence they had? I think that would be a drastically different promotion, especially when you look at some of the stalwarts of PWG. Your Young Bucks, your Sami Zayn, they all have something to owe to Sabu. Would Ring of Honor be different? And I know you may not think of Sabu and Ring of Honor where pure wrestling is revered, but think of guys that have been in Ring of Honor. Guys like Trent Acid, guys like the Briscoe brothers I just mentioned, guys like Homicide. Would they have done stuff that they did if it wasn't for Sabu? And would Ring of Honor even exist if there was no ECW? Because Gabe Sapolsky and Rob Feinstein, I know, the people that originally had the idea, Doug Gentry as well, all come from ECW. So I don't know that there would even be a Ring of Honor without ECW, and I don't know how big ECW would have got without Sabu and how much of the style would be different if there was no Sabu. Would they have taken more of a catch-as-catch-can style? Would they have gone more with what Shane Douglas was doing? It's very hard to say, because if you take Sabu out, you take out guys like Jerry Lynn, you take out guys like Rob Van Dam, Al Snow, who came around in ECW and wrestled a very similar style. You take out maybe some of the acceptance of the luchadors, like Rey Mysterio or Eddie Guerrero or Psychosis, who all kind of came in the wake of seeing Sabu doing some of these fantastic things. So again, the ripple effect, the butterfly effect. You take Sabu out, does ROH even exist? Does ECW become what ECW was? Or does it stay a local 3-state wrestling company that was just Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware? Then we have the obvious ones like Game Changer Wrestling. It is so obvious that Sabu's fingerprints are all over that company, with guys like Joey Janela that flat out idolize him, people like Mance Warner, other guys like Blake Christian or Alex Zane. Obviously, I mentioned him before, Nick Gage. GCW probably does not exist as a company if there is no Sabu. CZW as well, XPW, any of those companies with that kind of style. Might they have taken some influence from FMW? Maybe, but I think Sabu was a proof of concept that it worked in America. Last but not least, the company that I don't think would exist without Sabu's contributions, AEW. For good or for bad, if you love AEW, you hate AEW. The AEW mindset, at least original, the do-it-yourself ethos, the somewhat indie mindset, we're going to make it no matter what. We know that we're better than you and we're going to prove it every night. That was Sabu in his prime. Sabu didn't need WWE. He didn't need WCW. He was going to make it on his own, and he was going to carve his own path. When you look at guys like Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, guys that started the company, Cody Rhodes, not so much, but I'm sure he has something that he borrowed from Sabu. Guys like Jericho, who was a peer of Sabu and most likely took some influence that way. Darby Allin. Look at Darby Allin. Can you imagine some of the crazy things that Darby Allin did if Sabu hadn't done stuff that he did before? He throws his body around like Sabu did. That's the ripple effect that I think Sabu has had on wrestling. I don't think that there's an AEW if Sabu doesn't exist, if he doesn't carve that way, or at least it would be a drastically different company. That's why Sabu is so important to pro wrestling. And to wrap this up, this is why I think my arguments for why I think Sabu changed wrestling and why I think Sabu is a revolutionary, and obviously my first guy to go with to make one of these videos. Let me know what you think about this format. Do you like the idea? Do you like the concept of me doing a little bit of a deep dive, but not necessarily a career retrospective, more talking about their influence? Let me know what you think down in the comments. Did you like this? Do you want to see more of these? If this does well, I have some other wrestlers that are definitely in mind for videos for this. So again, Let me know down in the comments what you think about it. With all that being said, again, this is our first in a series, maybe or maybe not. If you hate this, it's not going to be a series because obviously I got to listen to the algorithm, and why am I going to put out videos that don't do well when I could make videos that do? I digress. Let me know your opinion down here. Our first one, even if it's only a one-of-one, because the guy himself is a one-on-one, put your ones to the sky. Let's go ahead and give Sabu the love and respect that he deserves this way. He's one of a kind. He's a one-of-one. He's a revolutionary. My name is George Coles.